The Sunday Times today reports that something like a fifth of mortgages in the EBS are in trouble. 42% if you look at buy-to-let mortgages in that one institution, 13% in AIB. Do you accept, Taoiseach, that there must be a big overlap between those mortgages in trouble and, for instance, the non-registration, the non-compliance with the household charge which closed last night?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a correlation there. I also note, though, that AIB said in their commentary in the last few days that they've been capitalised to a sufficient extent by the taxpayer that they won't need any further monies in dealing with these mortgages and may be in a position to actually hand some back. The household charge, remember that up until the late 1970s, when I joined the council, first of all, myself as a councillor, people paid their rates as a first charge every year. Because of the politics of the subsequent years, all that went. And you had a situation where small business, was being charged an increasing charge for rates every year to pay for services that you weren't able to provide them on the scale of what was involved. So all that culture went. Now, the introduction of the household charge at €1.90 a week as a precursor to a property charge is something that government have been very clear and very straight about here.
But if people won't even pay that, what chance of them agreeing to pay something much more substantial?
We need to broaden the tax base so that people understand that the taxes they pay go for the services that are provided locally, including jobs in the employment centres. So it's a new culture that's in for every citizen here now.
Would you not accept, Taoiseach, that a level of in or around 50% compliance, depending on whose base figure you take about the number of households in the country, it's not a success?
No, I'd be the first to say, obviously, when you didn't have this kind of charge since 1977, to put in place the database of who actually has property, what facilities you make available to pay it, where it can be paid and in what order, are always things that you have to adapt to. But in this case, this is now the law of the land. I'm greatly heartened by the huge response in the last 3 or 4 days. We'll have a memo to government in the next couple of weeks to see what exactly the exact figure is and proceed afterwards to implement that law.
And is there any question at all of looking at the idea of having a property tax or even water charges, and just going back to the idea, the old reliable, if you like, of putting maybe 1 or 2 pence on income tax? You're sure of getting that money that way?
Oh, of course you are, but I made the point that an increase in income tax is a charge on jobs and a charge on work, and the priority of government is jobs and getting people back to work. That was the theme of our Ardèche Getting Ireland Working.
So these charges, they're going to go ahead, the property tax, you're going to stick with that plan?
Yes, we're going to have a property tax, but I want it to be fair, I want it to be equitable, and I want it to be affordable.
What lessons then have you learned as you plan for that?
We'll base it, Sean, on the recommendations that government will consider when they come back in from that committee, and government will make its choice, probably before the end of the year, so that everybody will know well in advance what's involved here.
Do you accept at all the charge that the man who kept you on political life support, Phil Hogan, if I can put it like that, and then propelled you into this office, that he made a total mess of this?
At least Minister Hogan had the courage to stand up on what no other Minister for the Environment had for the last long period and say, I want to broaden the tax base here rather than put a charge on jobs, and I want everybody to be able to contribute. I'm building in a waiver scheme here. I'm introducing a charge of €1.90 per week for this year, and next year
half the population ignore them.
And we're going to have a property charge. Well, as I said, I'm grateful and very grateful for those who contributed and those who registered and those who paid. We'll see what the final figure is. But be clear on this. This is the law of the land, and we want everybody to contribute to that, and we will follow through on it very clearly.
You said last night, Taoiseach, that the burden of the bank bailout remains too heavy, despite the improvements that you got in the interest repayments last July. How much further improvement can you expect, given the hard line that the ECB took in regard to the promissory notes?
But the fact that the government do not have to borrow the €3.1 billion tomorrow in respect of the promissory note for this payment to Anglo-Irish means that there's a relief there, and the deferral by government bond to 2025 speaks for itself. But that's only one part of the 30 billion that's involved here. And remember, as I pointed out in the Dáil, Sean, the Troika themselves offered to undertake a paper on greater flexibility for Ireland. And what what we're looking for are the same flexible tools that now apply to the European Stability Mechanism and the EFSF to be applicable to this money that was borrowed prior to Ireland entering into the bailout, where we borrow that money at very high interest rates. And were that to be applied to us, and obviously that's where the negotiations go on with the European Central Bank, comprising of the 17 governors who are quite independent in their views. But if that were to be applied to Ireland, it would allow us to have a far greater flexibility in terms of our deficit and also to meet our debt repayments. So that work is proceeding ahead, and what's happening tomorrow in respect of the deferral is but one element of the bigger picture here.
You made one big prediction last night, Taoiseach. You said that the deficit will be down to 3% of GDP by 2015. Mm-hmm. Now, bearing in mind that technically at least the economy was back in recession at the end of last year, that in January and February retail sales continued to fall, how can you be so sure?
Well, it's very difficult to predict accurately what any growth figure for any country will be, given the broad range of things that are included in there. But I actually have never been as confident, Sean, in my long years in politics about the future of our country. And I'll put it this way to you. In the last 3 weeks, we signed, an economic cooperation agreement with Britain, which will have impact on Northern Ireland, a strategic partnership with China, and a brilliant response from the United States. I see the line of investment in here as being very strong. But I also see the growth in our exports and the quality and the branding of Ireland now as being a country of exceptional competence and high standards. That's why, for instance, in regard to China, just on one issue, I was glad to note that Premier Wen Jiabao undertook to send his scientific personnel here to Ireland to work with our scientific personnel in regard to competence and standards of Irish beef entering the China market, which would be of enormous significance. But my challenge, if you like, and the government's challenge, is to get our indigenous economy moving. And that's why Michael Noonan in his budget has made a number of changes there to help in the small ways that we can.
But can you say they're working if you've got those kind of figures coming out?
Well, we'll stand by our growth targets ourselves. The ESRI and others have made independent, projections here, because all the things that are tied into demonstrating what a growth rate will actually be, are uncertain. But I put it this way here, like the numbers of small businesses that I find, the number of entrepreneurs, the number of doers who want to get out there, who are fed up with this recession, who want access to credit, who want to get into the business of employing people and being a productive economy, that's where our strength is. And if we tie all those attributes together, there's very little can stop us. And that's why, Sean, if I might say as an addition, one of the big breakthroughs that I see at the European Council meetings is that we're now going to be talking about growth and jobs on their agenda as a central issue. Because if the economies of Europe are growing, that's good for Ireland.
A couple of quick questions as we come towards the end, Taoiseach. During the week, Brendan Howlin in the Dáil on the tribunal debate, the Mahon tribunal, he said there should be a consequence for those well-known people against whom adverse findings are reduced by a tribunal of inquiry. Joan Burton, another Labour minister, said something similar. What's your response to that?
Well, tribunals do two things. They determine findings of fact and they make recommendations. In respect of both Moriarty and Mahon, what government have done here was send both reports to the relevant authorities who have independent and complete authority in what they do following the findings of fact in any tribunal report. Government have a duty to respond to the recommendations insofar as they can or as they're willing to do in regard to any tribunal report. We've done some of that with Moriarty. We've sent Mahon off to each of the individual departments to respond back within a month. But on issues like breaking the link between political funding and business, that's being dealt with effectively by striking out corporate donations in respect of whistleblowers, of people who come across unethical behaviour, the protection of those. There are complicated elements within Moriarty who recommended changes in company law, which may not be feasible to do. I
know, but those are technical things, Taoiseach. But the big thing that jumped out of the papers, and you say you have no control over who appears in the picture with you, was the Dennis O'Brien thing. And sure enough, they can't empty Croke Park if Bertie Ahern turns up.
But let's deal with...
Should he be invited to something like the Economic Forum?
Well, all of those who attended the first one were invited to the second one. As I say, the follow-through from the Global Forum last October, organised by the Taoiseach, is now being followed through very, very clearly. And government will reflect on what it does for any future forum. But let me just deal with the New York issue, because people have been talking about this. I was invited to speak to an Ireland Inc. meeting in New York, where there were 200 or 300 business people, none of whom I knew were going to be there. And also to, on the same day, on Ireland Invest Day, ring the bell in the New York Stock Exchange. So I spoke at the meeting in the morning and went from that room right up to the podium to ring the bell. And that was all in the space of 2.5 minutes. I had no idea who was going to be on that podium. But I do know that one of the O'Reillys was there, as was Dennis O'Brien. And while they may have their own struggles going on, that's none of my business in respect of being invited by the chief executive of the New York Stock Exchange to ring the bell. Was it to stand outside the door and say, sorry, I can't go in on this platform if this
No, but you
appears.
might have been too happy, for the sake of argument, in another context, if Martin Galvin showed up at something at another time, and your predecessors in this office would have made sure that nothing like that would have happened.
If I find myself at the Connacht final and I'm 2 seats away from former Minister Flynn, what am I to do? Get up and walk out?
No, but the point is, I suppose,
Sean,
the question is, if you
attend,
well, for instance, the next economic forum, and people can say, look, Dennis O'Brien.
Let's be very clear on this, Sean. I accept invitations as Taoiseach to attend particular functions. I do not vet, and cannot and won't be in a position to vet the lists of those who attend. I'm going down to the Grand National at Fairyhouse on Monday week. Am I to leave the place if I find Michael Lowry there?
Of course you're hardly likely to do that, but the point is, should somebody like Dennis O'Brien be invited to these major events, or do you think you can't not invite him because, for instance, he's access to Bill Clinton?
But the point is that it wasn't I who invited Dennis O'Brien to the New York Stock Exchange or to the Ireland Inc. function out there. Oh. I was invited the same as anybody else. It happened to be the Taoiseach. So I don't vet the lists of who attends at these functions.
So you don't mind who shows?
This is an impossibility.
Okay,
I take the point that government have a responsibility in their actions in what they do with people, but also the authorities, the DPP, the Garda Commissioner, the Fraud Squad, the Revenue Commissioners, or whoever else, who have independent responsibility in respect of their response to findings of fact in any tribunal. That's a matter for those relevant independent authorities, and I know that they will follow through.
Your next big challenge at the end of 2 months from now, at the end of May, is the fiscal treaty referendum. Can we be sure, Taoiseach, that this is a one-shot referendum? You'll accept the verdict and that'll be that? You
can be sure it'll be a one-shot referendum, because this has to be approved by the 1st of January next year. But I just want to say this. As I said in the Ardèche, I can't overstress this. We have an enormously attractive package here in Ireland for inward investment, from tax, talent, track record and technology. Outstanding. But I can tell you this, Sean, from speaking to international business, international economists, international leaders, part of the reason for the attractiveness for investment in Ireland is not just what we offer, but it's also our central place in the European Union. And under any circumstances, whatever differences we have at home, whatever differences we have among ourselves, I would say to the Irish people, do not kick the future in the face. The train leaves on the 1st of January. We want to be on that. It's for our country, it's for our children, it's for our future. And a big yes vote is a brilliant opportunity to say to the world, Ireland is open for business, Ireland means business, and Ireland is moving with Europe to create that future where we can all have a better place and greater prosperity, and as a consequence, careers and opportunities for our young people.
A year and a bit in office finally, chairman or chief?
Both in this case. I think it's a case of one individual cannot rescue the world here. I can't deal with all the problems of the country. That's why we've got a very strong team. That's why I'm very happy in working with Eamon Gilmore and the Labour ministers. This is a government that's serious, that is working only in the people's interests, as I said last night, a government that has honesty and clarity and decisiveness at its core in working in its service of the people, is a government that I'm very proud to lead.
Taoiseach Enda Kenny, thank you for joining us on The Week in Politics.
Thank you, Sean.
I think we've heard enough.